So we're going to talk about three sort of things today. We're going to start with feeding wildlife responsibly and how to do that, and the different ways that we feed wildlife and how to do each one of those responsibly. We're going to talk about some coyote facts and misinformation, and then we'll end with what to do when you find injured or orphaned wildlife. And I'll sort of introduce these sections as we go in. So my deal, I worked as a wildlife rehabber. I worked for some rehabbers back in Tennessee when I was growing up, in high school and college. 2013, I started doing capture and transport for Skywatch here in town. We moved to Carolina Beach in 2011. 2021, I became a licensed small mammal rehabber. 2024, started a nonprofit, Coastal Wildlife Alliance. And then 2026, this year, I am applying for my rabies vector species license. I'm already vaccinated. I have all the requirements met. I just need to build some giant cages in my backyard. And I have to do that in such a way that my wife is okay with it. So that's taking a little while to get that past the approval process. So let's start with the spectrum of feeding wildlife. I came up with three ways that we feed wildlife primarily. I'm sure there are others, but these three seem to be the most common ones. So the first one is a bird feeder. The second one is putting food out for your outside cat or a feral cat colony. And the third one is trying to hand feed animals. I hope we all know not to do number three. There's enough YouTube videos of people getting bit doing this that I would think it shouldn't happen anymore, but it does. And so when I thought about these three methods of feeding wildlife, I sort of measured them on three criteria, four actually, but we'll start with the three. So interaction, how interactive is the feeding method with the animal? What's the risk of dependency? Like are they at risk of becoming dependent on this food source and therefore setting up a situation where if you leave, they're in trouble? And then habituation, which is tied back into interaction. The more interactive you are with the animals that you're feeding, the more of a risk of habituation, which just means that they lose their fear of humans and start to see humans as a food source. Everybody knows that phrase, a fed animal is a dead animal, right? That phrase is very true, and I have seen it come to pass in numerous occasions here in town. I actually started this presentation because we had some incidences on the island. So 6 or 7 years ago, we had a murder-suicide over somebody hand-feeding foxes. And so that just shows you sort of the extent that things can get out of hand in these situations. Now that is an extreme event, and I don't believe that happens often, but it happened. And then last year or the year before last, some foxes denned up next to a neighborhood, and some people thought it would be fun to feed the baby foxes chicken wings at the pool by hand. And I wish I had the picture of somebody just handing a chicken wing to a fox at the pool area. Eventually, those foxes became habituated, and they started to see humans as a food source. And so they would go up to random people demanding food. Eventually, they're going to go up to somebody that doesn't like that. And they did. And those people talked to the HOA. The HOA hired a wildlife control officer who came out and trapped and killed most of those foxes. As a wildlife rehabber, that is not the outcome I want. Right? If there's a world without wildlife control officers, I want it. Because they're just taking animals out of the environment. And I don't know if you guys know this or not, but I tell everybody just so they know. Wildlife control officers, if they catch a possum or a squirrel or something on your property, they can release that wherever they want. If they have a farm, if they have a site that they release animals, they can do that. If it's a raccoon or a fox or another rabies species, they have to either release it on site or euthanize it. So just so you know, if you have those animals in your attic or in your yard and you want them out, there are humane ways to do that. I have cards up here. I'm happy to walk anybody through the humane ways. Sorry for that detour. Also, if you guys have questions as we're going through this, I tend to be somebody who forgets his question if I don't ask it when it's in my head. And so feel free to raise your hand and we'll stop and talk about questions as we go through it. So back to bird feeders. Low interaction, in spite of the chickadee yelling at me to feed it faster. Low dependency risk. Like if you watch your bird feeders, I personally don't see birds there all day, right? They come and visit, they get a snack, and then they'll head out and do bird stuff. And then they might come back later on and get a snack, but they're not sitting there just feeding constantly. Habituation risk, because interaction is low, habituation risk is low. Outdoor cats, please bring your cats inside. If you have outdoor cats, please transition them to an indoor cat. Cats are bad for the outdoors. We've lost species of birds because of cats. And the outdoors is bad for cats. There's cars, there's coyotes, there's kids with BB guns. Like, there's all sorts of things that are bad for cats. Feeding cats outside, the interaction is low. You're just putting a bowl of food out. Although I know people that sit at their sliding glass door and watch for the wildlife to show up once they put that food out at night. Dependency risk is, I say, medium here, because cat food is sort of a complete diet for some animals. Possums can live on cat food, raccoons can live on cat food, just like your cat can. And so there is a slightly higher dependency risk. Habituation risk is low or medium, depending on whether or not you're just setting the bowl out or you're actually sitting there in a chair in front of your sliding glass door looking at the animal as it's eating. That will tend to start to lean towards habituation, right? If they're eating while they're looking you in the eye because you're watching them, then they'll start to associate you with food, and that's not what we want. Obviously, high level of interaction. Dependency risk is medium. I've seen people who put out more food for animals and feed them than they do for themselves, which is amazing to me, but they do it. The dependency risk is medium, depending on how often and what you feed them. And the habituation risk, because interaction is high, habituation risk is high. So just don't do that one. I think we all know that. The last criteria for all of these methods is disease spread. So we have to think about what we're doing in terms of spreading disease by feeding animals in these methods. The bird feeder has a high disease spread risk. Like, I don't know if you guys remember, but a couple of years ago there was a virus or something going around, and they said, pull your feeders down, because that's how it's getting spread. So a bird with the disease lands on the feeder, hangs out, maybe poops on the feeder, and then the next birds to visit that feeder catch that disease, and all of a sudden you have an outbreak. So we'll talk in a second about how to mitigate that disease spread risk. Feeding the cats, another high disease spread risk. So we don't have a lot of rabies in New Hanover County, but we have a ton of canine distemper. And so if you've ever seen a raccoon sort of acting drunk in your yard or heard about that in your neighborhood, that is probably distemper, because we have it in spades in New Hanover County. Distemper is spread by droplets. So if a raccoon with distemper comes and takes a bite of that food and leaves, and another raccoon comes up and takes a bite of that food and gets that droplet in its mouth, that raccoon now has distemper. It is incurable. There's nothing I can do as a rehabber but try and make its passing as gentle as possible. So both of those sort of common things, right? If you think about it, bird feeders are common. Feeding feral cats or your outside cats is fairly common as well. And both of those are high risks of disease. Ironically, the one thing that I tell you not to do has a low risk of disease spread, except from the animal to the human. If you get bitten, you might get a infection or rabies. Although again, New Hanover County is not a high risk for that. So how do we do this responsibly? Well, with bird feeders, they say clean your feeders by submersing in a diluted bleach solution once a week. And I do that religiously now. I change out my hummingbird food every 2 days and bleach that feeder. Actually, the way that I've done it seems good for me. Maybe it'll work for you. I have 2 feeders, and so I just swap them out and clean one while the other one's in use, and then vice versa. For the cats, bring your cat bowls in at night, right? So most of the animals that are coming and visiting your cat bowls are nocturnal. So raccoons are nocturnal, possums are nocturnal, foxes are crepuscular, but sometimes end up at night as well. If you keep it out between like 10 a.m. and 5 p.m., you're not going to get as much wildlife, and therefore you're minimizing the risk of disease spread. Also, get those cats inside. And then this one, just don't do it, ever. Never do it. All right, habituation changes animal behavior. So we're avoiding habituation because habituation does some negative things. If somebody calls and says, hey, every night about 10 o'clock, I have a raccoon that comes over the fence, he roots around my deck, and then he leaves in 15 minutes. I'm like, all right, that's a normal raccoon activity. You're on his food route every night, and like he's coming through looking to see if you got anything for him. If somebody tells me that every night at 10:30 a raccoon shows up at my sliding glass door and stands on his hind leg and knocks on the window like he's expecting me to deliver his meal, that is a habituated raccoon. That raccoon will get into trouble with people because they're harder to get rid of once they're habituated, because they are like, I know you got food for me, because all of my reinforcing behavior has said humans are food. They got food. And so they get insistent. Habituation, in addition to changing behavior, also removes all of the humane ways we can sort of harass them into leaving. So we use sound, we use lights, we use water. Those are easy ways that you're not injuring the animal, you're not trapping the animal, you're just encouraging it to leave using stimulus that is negative to them. So if I put if raccoons have moved into my attic and had babies, and I put a Bluetooth speaker up there and I play AC/DC, she will take those babies and move them somewhere else. They don't like it. And it's free. I don't have to pay a wildlife control officer. Everybody lives. And you just have to listen to AC/DC a little bit coming from the attic. All right. The only really responsible, non-disease spread risk way to feed wildlife. Can anybody guess what it is from this picture?
Native plants.
Native plants. Can anybody name the plants that you see up there? I think I can do all of them but the last one, because I'm not good with my pine species. So I actually think, so this to me looks like serviceberry, like unripe service berries. Those leaves look serviceberry to me, and those berries look like serviceberries or Saskatoon berries. That bear might get sick because he's eaten looks like the branch of a native black cherry tree, and so I don't know why he's eating the branch. He should be eating the berries. But the bear knows what he's doing, I guess. And the possum, anybody know what the possum's eating? Persimmons, yeah. They're sort of known for eating persimmons. Persimmons grow really well here, just to take it on a little native plant detour. Persimmons grow really well here. Native black cherries grow really well here. There's a tree downtown that was just laden with black cherries that I went and grabbed a couple and got some syrup for cocktails last year. Serviceberries grow well. I have probably 4 serviceberry trees in my yard, and they're all doing well. That looks like a fox squirrel with either a pond or a loblolly pine cone, but I'm not a big pine person. So yeah, native plants. So here's a bird eating a caterpillar off of a native black cherry tree, and the caterpillar is important here because really, yes.
This is related to possums. It's a little off.
That's all right.
We found 3 dead possums over the course of a couple of years in our yard.
Okay.
I've heard that mosquitoes are on their diet, and both our neighbors at the time were spraying for mosquitoes. Is that what's killing them? Or?
I don't think so.
Oh, okay.
I would guess, if I had to put money on it, I would guess rat poison over mosquito poison. So possums are not big consumers of mosquitoes. They will eat insects. They're opportunistic feeders. They'll eat anything. Yeah. And so I wouldn't expect them to eat mosquitoes because that would be a hard thing for a possum to catch. Mm-hmm. They're a little derpy and not so agile as to be able to catch flying mosquitoes. But they will absolutely eat rat poison, and we'll talk about those horrible black bait boxes that are everywhere. I would put rat poison probably as the guilty party there. I don't know what else. 3, like, was it every year there was just a new dead one?
We weren't dealing with rats at the time, so our neighbors might have been. But
so that's just it. It's always a neighbor, right? That that puts out poison. Yeah, you never know. Yes. So that is true, that they will eat roaches. But what I've found, we use some roach poison indoors. I don't ever put it outside. We use it indoors, and I was worried about, like, my son. We took some down to his apartment in Florida because Florida has roaches I thought they were bad here. Florida, they are everywhere. And I took some poison down, but I checked beforehand because it's a pretty powerful poison. But I was worried about his cat eating a cockroach and then getting sick from that. But it's not an issue, apparently, even with some of the stronger poisons, because the amount of poison that a cockroach ingests is small. And so I wouldn't put it on. I wouldn't put it on that. Although I am not familiar with every poison these pest control companies use, and so it's entirely possible that they're using something that's stronger that I don't know about. But I find a lot of animals that have ingested rat poison, or I work with animals that have ingested it and not died, but it's given them, like, every fox around here has mange. I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but you can't find a non-mangy fox in New Hanover County, and it's because of those black bait boxes. The foxes eat a poisoned rat. They don't die from the poison, but their defenses are now minimalized, and they can't fight off what they normally would be able to fight off with the mite that causes mange. And so I have to set up a feeding program and get a $70 Brevecto pill into those foxes, and it just cures them for 3 months. So I have to do that multiple times a year for some of these foxes that are in areas where there's just tons of bait boxes. But those bait boxes kill squirrels, they kill possums, they hurt foxes. I don't get a lot of raccoon poison calls, but I don't because we've lost a lot of raccoons to canine distemper in New Hanover County. It's supposed to be a cyclical disease. We have it nonstop now. All right, back to caterpillars. So native plants and trees are great because, like this cherry tree, there's blossoms for pollinators, there's fruit for wildlife, but also our native black cherry tree supports 400 plus species of caterpillar. And so when you're looking at what native trees to plant, there's a list of, like, keystone species that support the most caterpillars. And really what we want to do now is turn our yards back into caterpillar factories. Because who eats caterpillars? Who doesn't eat caterpillars? The only picture I couldn't find of them actually eating a caterpillar was of foxes, but I love foxes so much I had to include them anyway. There's a possum chowing down on a woolly bear caterpillar. There's a chipmunk eating a caterpillar, or a rat. Chickadees, obviously, I think they need like 3,000 to 5,000 caterpillars to raise a nest of baby chickadees. Other insects eat caterpillars, for God's sakes. Reptiles, amphibians, snakes. Who knew copperheads eat caterpillars? But they all do. And the reason that everybody eats caterpillars is because they're a superfood. They're like nature's superfood. They have protein, they have vitamins and minerals, they have fats, they have amino acids, and it's all wrapped up in this very easily eaten and digestible body, right? It's not in a hard beetle carapace or a bony cricket. Like, it's a nice, soft, squishy meal.
So should we be eating caterpillars?
I mean, there's an argument for it. But we don't currently produce enough caterpillars for our birds, let alone our humans. And so we've got to take these lawns that we've turned into food deserts for wildlife and make them productive again. And that is native plants. So those keystone species that I was talking about, for trees, you're looking at oaks, and we're talking about deciduous oaks, so oaks that lose their leaves in the winter. If you've ever felt a live oak leaf, it's very, like, thick and leathery and probably needs to be to last through the winter. But those wouldn't be easily eaten by caterpillars. So we're talking things like white oaks or swamp chestnut oaks, other oaks that lose their leaves in the fall. Those are the better ones to plant, the more productive ones. And oaks will support around 500 caterpillar species, so they're huge. Oaks also give us acorns, so there's more wildlife value than just the caterpillar. And they're pretty trees. The second most productive tree in terms of caterpillars is our native cherries and plums, with like 400 species of caterpillar supported. So if you really want to do something, plant an oak and a native cherry or a native plum. And then you have, there's probably some overlap, but even if there's 100 species overlap, you're still looking at 800 species that you're supporting. And so, in terms of our native cherries and plums, we've talked about black cherry, that grows well here. That's a big, tall tree, like it grows tall. We also have smaller plum trees that grow native to New Hanover County. So there used to be a bunch of spots in New Hanover County where I could go find Chickasaw plums, which is one of our native plums. I can't find them anymore because they've bulldozed most of those sites. But if you're ever eating at the Monkey Junction PTs, and you want to walk back behind their building, there's a little ditch, and it's full of Chickasaw plums. It probably has ripe plums in the next like 2 or 3 weeks. You can go pick some and try one if you want, and see what they look like when they grow. They're sort of a shrubby plant, but they're great. And then willow, we have black willow is our native willow. I think Virginia willow as well. Black willow you can find commercially. I don't know that you can find Virginia willow commercially. River birch is our birch species here, and tulip poplar I see growing a lot. In terms of flowering plants, goldenrods, New Hanover County is full of goldenrods. And the first goldenrods I got were rescues from roadside ditches that were getting mowed. They grow great here. We have a tall goldenrod that's just beautiful. Goldenrod and mountain mint are the two flowers that bring out pollinators that I don't see any other time of the year, except when those two species are blooming. So you'll discover all sorts of native pollinators that you just don't ever see if you put out goldenrods. Sunflowers, we have native swamp sunflowers. We also have muck sunflowers, which in my opinion are a little prettier. They're taller, so my muck sunflowers get about 10 feet tall and have multiple sunflower flowers on it. Native strawberry, I think you can go get that at Shelton Herb Farm if you want to grow that. And we have some beautiful native hibiscus. So Texas Star hibiscus is a bright red native hibiscus. They grow well here. They need a lot of water though. So just if you plant hibiscus, be ready to water them. Hairy pod cowpea sounds like a made up word to me. I don't know what that is. I've never seen it before, so I can't really speak to it. But so there's your map for making a productive yard, right? If you want to start creating caterpillars, which is what we need to do, there are the species that you need to plant, right? If you have a small amount of space and can only pick 1 or 2, there's your list. All right, now we move into the trivia form. There's prizes in the form of Hershey's Kisses. I know it's early for chocolate, but is it ever really too early for chocolate? So here's how we play this game. I'm gonna tell you a fact about coyotes, and then I'm gonna ask you to raise your hand, and you can tell me whether you think it's true or false. I might call on you to ask you why you think that way. I am not doing that to ridicule you. You are here to learn, and I appreciate that. I'm somebody that firmly believes that education trumps fear at every time, and there's a lot of fear out there about coyotes. And so if I ask you why do you believe that, I'm not doing that to make you feel uncomfortable or to make fun or anything. I genuinely, it's helpful to know where this stuff comes from, because that helps me sort of figure out how to combat it. And if you answer my question, Morgan will give you a Hershey's Kiss. Please specify nuts or no nuts. There's almond and regular. All right, you guys ready to go?
Yeah.
Oh, ground rules. Okay, so anecdotal versus typical established behavior. Everybody has a cousin that saw a coyote doing something that nobody's ever seen a coyote do before. That is anecdotal information, and we don't concern ourselves with that. That is one-off behavior. We like to talk about typical coyote behavior. What's a coyote doing on a normal day under normal circumstances? We're here to learn. There's a lot of misinformation out there. I'm not here to ridicule. No coyote bashing. If you're familiar at all with how coyotes have been treated in this country, it's been 200 years of just an assault on that species, and I'm done with it. I can't tolerate it anymore. All right, coyote true or false number 1. I start with the hardest one, guys, so it gets easier from this one. In North Carolina, coyotes are an invasive species. So who thinks that's true? Nobody thinks that's true. You do think it's true.
Yeah, I don't know why.
Well, you just took the wind out of my next question. All right. So everybody thinks this is false.
Well, I mean, are you talking all of North Carolina or Hanover County, New Hampshire?
I'm talking all of North Carolina. So does the state of North Carolina consider coyotes, are they considered an invasive species in the state of North Carolina?
The government.
Anybody. I mean, yes, for our sakes, we'll say the government.
Yeah, okay.
Because that's what matters. Do you have a question? What's it?
Aren't coyotes? I don't think they are. No.
Okay.
Great question.
So for those of you that don't, does anybody want to volunteer and tell me why you don't think they're an invasive species? Yes.
I think why they're not invasive, in my opinion, and I also went to school for wildlife a little bit.
Oh, okay.
Was now this is kind of what I think is because when we cleared the land, they spread. So they were already, in the west, and they spread just by us clearing the land.
Okay. So that's partially true. So they advanced their range naturally. And they did that when we actually took all of the predators that would sort of keep that population of coyotes in check. We killed them all. So we removed wolves and bears functionally from the lower 48 states. That left a vacuum that was then filled by coyotes. And so they did 2 range expansions. I'm getting ahead of myself. This is false, right? So coyotes are not an invasive species in North Carolina. The reason they're not an invasive species is because the term invasive has a very specific scientific definition. And it's 2 parts. The first part is they have to be non-native. So coyotes are not native to North Carolina. They weren't here to begin with. They occupied a space sort of in between the Mississippi River and California in the Great Plains. So they weren't here. So they fit the non-native. Native is also relative, right? Coyotes are native to the United States. They're not native to North Carolina. So you can have a plant that's native to the coastal plain, but not native to the Piedmont. So when you're talking about native and non-native, you have to be specific about what you're talking about. So they're non-native to the ecosystem. They're introduced by humans. So even though some hunters illegally brought in some coyotes in the 1980s, we don't believe that those are the coyotes that colonized this state. The coyotes that colonized North Carolina came from Tennessee. They came from Georgia. They came from that western sort of expansion into the east. And so they don't meet number 1. They meet non-native, but they weren't introduced by humans either wittingly or unwittingly. The second part of the definition of invasive is that they cause environmental harm or ecological harm. So if you guys think about an invasive species like, at least with the river, it would be Phragmites would be a good example of a native or an invasive species. Kudzu, I think, is a popular. The pythons in the Everglades. Those are all
The fire ants.
And with
fire ants, exactly.
wisteria.
With Chinese wisteria. Oh, I hate it. Those are plants that were brought in by humans, or animals that were brought in by humans, or came here piggybacking on the commercial plant trade, and are now in the environment and causing harm. All of those. So false. Yeah, good job, everybody.
Do we all get chocolate kisses?
Well, let's save them for the end. But if you guys keep it up, yes, absolutely.
Sorry, instructions
So
unclear.
are you saying that they cause harm? Or
They do not. Coyotes do not cause harm. They've not been shown to cause any ecological harm. So they don't meet either of the qualifications of invasive.
Okay.
And I always get people that argue that point with me online. I don't know if you've ever been involved in a Facebook post about coyotes, but boy, geez, it gets heated. And so I keep this in my back pocket, which is an email from a wildlife biologist with the state that just confirms that they don't consider coyotes invasive for the 2 reasons that we just talked about. All right, number 2. Coyotes have a negative effect on deer populations. Who thinks this is true? Boy, did somebody warn you guys about my true-false game? Because you're like 2 for 2 now.
We got a good crowd.
All right. Can anybody tell me why they don't think that why they think they don't have a negative effect on deer populations?
Deer
Yeah.
are too big.
Deer are too big. That's exactly right. Coyotes' diets are rodents and rabbits, insects, and native fruit. And they just don't typically take down animals that are bigger than they are. They also are solitary hunters, which I just messed up my next fact. Oh! It doesn't matter, because you guys were going to get it right anyway, so it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. They're solitary hunters, so they don't take down larger animals. They typically go with what's easy and small, and that's rodents and rabbits. I see a lot of persimmon seeds and coyote poop in the fall, so they're eating fruit as well.
I've got a question about the solitary hunter. I've seen 4 coyotes together go across my backyard.
So they are solitary hunters, but they live in a hierarchical social structure. And we'll talk about that in one of the other true and false ones. Yes?
I heard that if you have bird seed, you should clean up from below because they will come and eat the leftover bird seeds if you're getting coyotes in your yard.
That's a great point, and we didn't talk about that with the bird feeders, but your bird feeders are feeding way more than birds and squirrels. So I used to live in Carolina, I still live in Carolina Sands, but we used to live in a house that was next to a wooded lot, one of the few wooded lots that was left. And just for kicks, I put out a wildlife camera on my bird feeder. And in one night in Carolina Beach, I got deer, I got 2 raccoons, I got 2 possums, I got 2 species of fox. I got red and gray fox visiting that bird feeder, and everybody knew to put their hand up and tip it and get the food on the ground. Although after the deer came and shook it, there was more seed on the ground for everybody. I also caught my neighbor's Hitler cat, and I call him Hitler cat because he had a little mustache, but also because he was constantly trying to expand his territory into our yards. Your bird feeders are feeding everything, and so I would think it would be super hard to clean up bird seed out from under in a grassy yard out from under your feeder. But yes, if you want to limit the other species that come, you'd have to do that. And rats, rats love bird feeders. And I tell people, back to the poison for a bit, I tell people you can poison and trap and kill your way through the rat population in Wilmington for the rest of your life, and you will not make a dent. They can have 15 to 20 babies at a time, 4 times a year, and that's 80 babies a year. I can't trap. I don't have the time to trap 80 rats a year. And so you will never get rid of rats in New Hanover County. The best thing you can do is make your house a fortress so that they can't get in. And that will prevent you from having to use poisons, right? If you do that, you're good. All right, boy, that was a big detour from deer. So this is mostly false. The only time that they have a negative effect on deer populations is when you have a small isolated population of deer, like on Pleasure Island, and the coyotes are there. So that's a captive population of deer that cannot escape or move around to avoid the coyotes. And so in that case, they might have a negative a negative effect on the population. In all other cases, they have either a neutral effect, so no effect, or they have a positive effect. Now, that doesn't make any sense because they do occasionally eat deer, and they take a lot of fawns. So coyotes are responsible for anywhere from 40 to 80% of fawn death, and so they're taking a lot of them. How does that math up that they don't have a negative effect? So if you think about it, coyotes are eating the deer, adult deer, that would be dead by the end of the winter anyway. And so that means it's old, it's injured, or it's sick. And so if you think about that from a population standpoint, if I kill the sick one, then suddenly that animal can't spread whatever it's sick with to the other members of the herd. If I kill the old one, now all of a sudden, if that was an old buck that I killed, we have new genetics coming up. And new genetics for any population is always good. It makes them stronger. And so if you think about it in terms of that, it makes a little bit more sense. I don't know what taking out an injured member of a herd does, because I'm not a deer scientist and I don't know a ton about their herd dynamics. But taking out just the sick and the old is a positive effect for deer herds. And we had a paper, there's actually in North Carolina, a paper published on coyote effects on deer, because we have studies from before coyotes showed up, and we have studies from afterwards, so they can look at that data and see that there's no negative effect, really.
Question.
Yeah.
When did the coyotes show up?
80s to 90s. So there was an expansion. I'm sorry, maybe Morgan can bring me back for my coyote talk. You guys are getting 3 different talks compressed into one presentation. But in that coyote talk, I go through the different range expansions. So there was one northern expansion up over into Canada, where they cross-pollinated with Algonquin wolves up there, and then dogs. And so the DNA for that northern population is very different from our DNA and also from the western coyote DNA. At the same time, they were coming out on a southern route as well through Texas and Louisiana. Those coyotes mated with red wolves, and so red wolves down in Texas and Louisiana, the small population that remains, have a lot of coyote DNA. And coyotes have a decent amount of red wolf DNA, and that's why they're bigger here. So if you look at the size comparison, the western coyote is a small, thin animal. The northern coyote is a much larger, it's the largest. So western's the smallest, northern's the largest. Our southeastern coyote is in between, probably closer to the western, but not as big as the northern. And still, I think we have to sterilize the coyotes in the area around Alligator River so that they don't mate with the red wolf population that we're trying to reintroduce there. All right. Well, I blew this one. So like gray wolves, coyotes are pack hunters. So I don't know if you guys have ever seen a wolf hunt, or the other species that I see doing it is African wild dogs. And it's a coordinated event where everybody has their role. Some are chasers, some are ambushers, some are flankers that go around and flank the animal. It's a very well organized hunt. Coyotes, I'm going to go ahead and just say mostly false. Coyotes don't do this. Coyotes are solitary hunters. Occasionally when they have a litter, mom and dad will go out and hunt together to increase the likelihood of success. But having said that, coyotes are extremely adaptable, right? There's a reason that we've killed them and they've still advanced their territory. And that is because they can go from being solitary to being a collective member of a group with like a flip of a switch. And so they're very adaptable. So it would not surprise me if there were coyotes living in an area where the prey was mostly large, like they didn't have a lot of rodents and rabbits, they had a lot of large prey. It would not surprise me a bit if they said, you know what, we're gonna have to work together to get to eat. And so let's work together to bring down this elk or moose or deer. Maybe a young moose, I don't know. They have access to the entire Acme catalog of exploding dynamite and anvils. So again, mostly false because I think they're adaptable enough that if they had to do it, they would. I don't know if you feel like jumping down a rabbit hole someday. There are documented videos of coyotes working with badgers. Because when coyotes work with badgers, badger can dig, but he can't run. Coyotes can run, but they can't dig. And so when they work together, there's a 100% success rate for both animals getting food. And badgers are jerks. Like there's a reason that to badger somebody is a negative thing, right? They're not fun animals. And so for a coyote to work alongside a badger, like that's pretty amazing to me. To understand that like if we work together, we're successful. And so it's a cute video if you ever feel like hunting it down. So coyotes live in family groups. They just travel and hunt alone or in loose pairs. Wolves hunt as a pack.
I have a question.
Sure.
Even though they're solitary hunters mostly, do they share the spoils?
I don't know the answer to that question. I imagine that they do with their pack if it's a larger kill. If it's a rabbit or a rat, probably not. I would expect them to bring that back to their babies to sort of teach them this is what we eat, but I wouldn't expect them to share it with the larger, unless again it was something like a deer, and a deer I would expect the whole pack comes and feeds off of it. All right, the final true or false. Let's see if I can catch anybody with this one. Oh no, I went backwards. Sorry. The only way to control the coyote population is to kill them. We may have blown this one too. False. Right. Does anybody know why it's false? Because there's a specific reason why.
Because you put out a plastic coyote and that keeps them away.
A plastic coyote.
You haven't seen those?
I haven't.
Oh, we got them all over the place.
Really?
Yeah.
They put out plastic
They
coyotes?
got bushy tails on them, and it allegedly scares it. I mean, they even dress them up for Halloween and.
I've never heard of that. Yes.
They breed really quick.
Pardon?
They breed really quick.
They do breed quick. The reason that killing them doesn't control the population is because they do something called compensatory or responsive breeding. And so since 1850, when we started mass killing coyotes, they've tripled their range. So that tells you that killing just doesn't work. We still currently kill an estimated 500,000 coyotes a year. A lot of that is done by the USDA at using our tax dollars. And it's done because ranchers don't like coyotes. Mostly sheep and goat ranchers, which is on the decline in this country, because coyotes aren't going to take down cows. If they're not going to take down deer, they're certainly not going to go after large cows. And we just had a kill up in, there's the Carolina Coyote Classic, and they killed 402 coyotes. And they think they're doing something good, but they're not. And so let's talk about why they're not. So what you see here is a standard coyote social group, right? You have the alpha male and female up at the top. They're the only ones in a normal coyote hierarchy. That alpha male and female are the only ones who breed. Everybody else is not breeding, but they're still members of the hierarchy, right? So you may have siblings. You may have older offspring from previous years as part of that pack. But the only two that are breeding are the alpha male and female. You come in and you kill, say, one of the alphas. You kill a couple of the pups. You kill a couple of members of the pack, which is probably something that happens in the Coyote Classic, right? They take out a portion of a pack. Then all of a sudden, that social structure is disrupted. And so now you have outside coyotes. So remember this, we talked about how coyotes can be single or part of the group. The single coyotes then move into this vacuum, and they mate with the alpha. They mate with another member of the pack because there's no alpha male and female to keep everybody else in check anymore. And so where you would have had 3 babies under a normal coyote social structure, now you have 20 babies because everybody's breeding, and they're breeding more because they're compensatory or responsive breeders. Now, I cannot speak to the validity of these numbers. I don't know that the standard litter is 3. I don't know that if you kill that you're going to end up with 20. But the point is, you're going to get exponentially more coyotes by disrupting their social structure, by killing them, than you would if you just left them alone. They will reach an equilibrium. They will reach the carrying capacity that land can support, and we've seen it in Yellowstone. So they introduced wolves back into Yellowstone, right? And we saw a bunch of positive changes to that. One of the things that we saw was the coyote population suddenly went down, but then it leveled out. And so now there are coyotes and wolves living together. The coyotes know not to go anywhere near wolves, but for a while they were running the show. Like, coyotes became the default apex predator in the United States because we killed off all the other apex predators. So they were sort of de facto. But in places where we're bringing back those predators, they are their populations are going down, and then they're reaching an equilibrium where they stay. And so it's not just not effective to kill coyotes. You're actually hurting your cause. If your goal is less coyotes, leaving them to their own devices is the best way to go. All right, now let's talk about babies and injured wildlife. I think these are red squirrel babies, which we don't currently have in North Carolina, or at least not in the coastal plain of North Carolina. But they were just so cute that I couldn't not use them. So general rules: if you find orphaned or injured wildlife, do contain them if you can safely do so. So there are lots of turtles crossing our roads. I don't know if you've noticed, but there are some bad drivers in Wilmington. And there are people that do not care if you're in the road trying to get a turtle, they will hit you. And so please, please, only save the animal if it is safe to do so. Keep them warm and dark and quiet. Pretty easy to do. Put them in a box, put them in your garage, and as long as your garage is quiet. Call a wildlife rehabber. My cards are here. There's another slide that has the name and number of some other ones if you're in a different area other than New Hanover County. try and figure out what's happened. Like, I'm not asking you to be a detective, but I spend a lot of time trying to figure out what's going on in any situation where somebody's calling me about babies. And we'll talk about why when we start to look at the specific things that you need to do or think about based on the species that it is. But if you have some idea of what's going on, that helps me figure out the best course of action when you call. Do not try to give food or water unless you're instructed by the rehabber. So a lot of people see an animal and they're like, he just seems thirsty. Like, I need to give him some liquid. And they'll go get a kitten kit at a pet store, or they'll get a dropper, and they will aspirate that animal. Aspiration is when liquid goes into the lungs. And then when I get that animal, it's got aspiration pneumonia, so I have to work twice as hard to not only raise it, but also now cure it from aspiration pneumonia, which is a lengthy process. It forces me to give them antibiotics, which are not good for growing animals. And so don't ever give water or food unless I tell you to, just because the downsides of it are horrible for the animal. Don't comfort cuddle it. It's terrified. Like, squirrels will actively come up to humans for help, and they probably will suffer cuddling better than most animals. Possums hate it. Squirrels will put up with it. But I recommend that you just don't do it because you don't know what's going on with that animal. You don't know what their temperament's like. Squirrels have the bite pressure that is higher than great white sharks. And when I learned that fact, I started handling squirrels a lot differently. So you just put it in the box and put it away. And finally, please don't give it to a rando on Facebook who's always wanted to raise a possum. If I had a nickel for every animal post where somebody's like, I found this animal, and like 10 people show up and they're like, oh, I want a pet squirrel. Can you please bring me that pet squirrel, or I'll come get it. You let me know where you are and I'll come get it. And I'm like, please don't give the squirrel to this random person on Facebook. I now, for the most part, I report anybody that I hear of doing wildlife rehab without a license. And the reason I do that is because my one question for them is, what happens when you have a sick animal? Because as a licensed rehabber, I have to have a veterinarian that has agreed to see these animals. And if they're not licensed, they don't have a vet that can see them, because vets can't legally look at wildlife unless they come from a rehabber. And most vets just won't anyway. And so how do they get medicine? I get prescription meds for my animals from the veterinarians. And so if you get an aspirated squirrel in and you're unlicensed, you can't take him to the vet. You can't give him antibiotics because you don't have squirrel antibiotics. And so what do? And so I think for most unlicensed situations, those animals languish and die. And I just can't put up with it. All right, species-specific stuff. We have a ton of possums in this town. People hit them all the time. I find them hit on 15-mile-an-hour roads, and I don't understand it. Unless they run out in front of you at the last minute, which possums don't typically do, they freeze. You should be able to avoid them in the road. So for car hits, if mom's alive and has been hit by a car and there's babies, bring everybody. Just put them all in a box and bring them all to me. If mom's dead, bring the babies. If they're in a pouch, like, I don't know how many of you have ever checked the pouch of a possum. It's a pretty gross thing to do, but it's necessary to save those babies. And so I'm going to try to describe a possum nipple. It looks like an alien. So there's a circle, and there's probably 13 1.5 to 2 inch nipples coming off of it. And these babies, when they're born, they're the size of like a honeybee or a jelly bean. And they crawl into that pouch and they attach themselves to those nipples. The nipples go down into their stomach. So if I get those babies, I have to tube feed them. So I stick a tube down into their stomach, and that's how they get fed. That's how they're fed on mom with that nipple. And so when you're taking them out of the pouch, I always tell people, pinch the nipple right before the mouth of the baby and then gently and firmly pull. Because if you don't pinch and there's milk in there, as you're pulling it out, that milk could go into their lungs, and then we have the aspiration problem again. So if you're ever going to do that, just remember to pinch. Single babies. So we've learned a little bit about possum baby behavior, mom baby behavior in the last couple of years. We used to say, the advice used to be, if you see a baby or babies on their own, mom is not coming back. That is changing. So there are lots of animals that park their babies, and parking just means we're going to set you over here while we go look for food. Otters do that, raccoons do that. We are now learning that possums also do that, in spite of what we've thought over the years. So I got a call from somebody who found 10 babies under her kayak, and she was like, oh, the mom's left them. They need to be brought in. And so I went down, and like within 5 minutes, I see mom hanging out over by the HVAC unit, and I'm like, oh, she's just parked them. Like, she's going to come back. She knows where they are. She's watching us going, please don't mess with my babies. And then the lady opened the kayak after I told her not to, and they all scattered. I still think, though, since mom was so close, she came back and got those babies. Like, I wasn't going to like chase them down and bring them in because I didn't want to stress them out. And I assumed mom, I was like, everybody leave the area. Let's let mom just corral them again. And now we know that she's going to put them under the kayak. And they were fine with that once they saw the error of their ways. Under 8 inches from snout to rump, bring in. If they're over 8 inches, assess the situation. Like, again, it's more detective work. Are they walking funny? Are they like freezing? Like they're not trying to escape you? Those little baby possums are sassy. Like they will bite you. They will like try and run. Like they're super fast, actually. Do they have a white nose? Like, I don't know if it's the color in the picture, but I look at the noses of every possum in this picture and I'm like, they all have anemia because those noses are white and not pink. They should have a nice pink nose. If they have a white nose, they're probably overrun with fleas and they need to come in and get some treatment or a bath or something. I used to like just keep everybody at above a certain size, but I now assess the attitude of babies when I decide whether or not to keep them or release them back. Because I have had some that were way smaller than 8 inches that are like, they're stressed out by captivity, so they're not going to do well with me raising them. And they were doing just fine on their own. Somebody just, because it was small, said it needs to come in. And I will just go release those guys back to where they came from. Squirrels. Car hit juveniles or adults. Carefully grab with a towel, so a thick towel preferably, and just like I wrap them, like I'm trying to like cover a football with a towel, and then put them in a box just with the towel on top of it. If you have gloves, like they better be thick gloves because, like I said, if it's an adult squirrel, that bite pressure is huge. They will bite to the bone, and so do not endanger yourself. If an adult's been hit by a car, I find that 9 times out of 10 they are paraplegic from that. They get a spinal injury and they can't move their back legs. And so you can sometimes just sort of corral them into a box rather than lifting them up, which is much safer. Baby squirrels, man, they will come out of a tree and look for help. They will come up to a dog. They will come up to a person. They will come up to anybody trying to find help if mom has died and they're dehydrated. So I've tried to break it down into the different sorts of situations that lead to orphan squirrels. So if there's a nest or tree cut down, people just do that whenever around here. They don't care that it's baby season. They'll just cut down a tree or trim a tree, and I'll get a call, and they'll be like, oh, we were trimming our palm tree, and a nest came out, and there are babies in it. If that's the case, mom is still alive, and squirrel moms are good moms, and they will absolutely take those babies back, even if you've touched them. Like I've kept them overnight and fed them artificial milk overnight and then reunited them the next day. So mom will absolutely take them back. I have a video that I send to people that's just the sound of a baby squirrel crying that will get the moms to come get them out of the box that's at the base of the tree. Nest blows out in a storm. Mom is still alive. So we want to reunite. Mom is way better at raising those baby squirrels than I am, and I'm decent at it, but like I'm no squirrel. If it's a pink or barely gray baby on the ground, look for mom, but mom's probably not there. I find that if they're that young and they're out of the nest, like there's a problem. Male squirrels will sometimes rip a nest up though, like just to try and like get the female to notice them. It seems like a horrible way to do it. But they will throw the babies and the nest on the ground. And so if that's the case, mom is still alive and we can reunite. But that's why I say look for mom here. So if somebody called me with this situation, I would send them that video and tell them to play it under the tree and look for a squirrel that's interested, right? So if it's a mom squirrel and she hears that noise, she will be frantically trying to get those babies. If a baby's approaching you, mom is passed. Bring in. If the baby has on the ground covered with fleas, mom is passed and bring it in. We lose moms to cars. We lose moms to hawks. We lose moms to whatever. And so those babies need to come in and get raised by a rehabber. I find that the worst condition, if they look like crap, that's a sure sign that mom is not around because she would be taking care of them otherwise. Raccoons and foxes. I don't get a ton of calls about raccoons and foxes in New Hanover County. I feel like this, I do get a lot of calls about mangy adult foxes. I don't get a lot of calls about baby foxes or baby raccoons. I think maybe I get 4 or 5 baby raccoon calls a year. The car hit juveniles or adults advice is the same regardless of species. Carefully grab with a towel and contain. It's especially important that you not come into physical contact with your bare skin with raccoons and foxes because they are considered by the state to be a rabies species. Again, we don't have a big problem with rabies in most of New Hanover County. Every once in a while we'll get a case every year or two up in sort of the outer limits like Castle Hayne area. We had a rabid raccoon a couple of years ago. But if that raccoon scratches or that fox scratches or bites you, it will have to be killed and sent off to the state for testing. So you really want to not have contact with it. So gloves, box, towel, anything you can do to not let it touch you. If they're babies, if the den is disturbed, like with construction, mom is alive, she will move them. You just need to let her do that. I find that sometimes when I try reunification, they'll put the box right here and they'll stand right here and watch it. And you have to give them room and space to come back and be able to take those animals when they're comfortable. And they're not going to be comfortable if you're leaning over it. Mange or injury, they need medical attention. I would treat them and then reunite it if it's babies. If it's an adult, I would release it back where found. If it's a baby by itself, bring it in. Call me and we'll figure it out. Birds, Morgan, keep me honest here. So this little guy is a nestling. He's not standing like this one is. His feathers aren't really developed, although they're developing. This guy should be in a nest. And if you see him out of the nest, there's something wrong. This is a fledgling. He's standing up, his feathers are in, he's out of the nest, and it's not a problem. The fledgling stays the stage, they're out of the nest and around on the ground or in bushes and still being fed by mom and dad, just like exploring their world. Now, there's a point where they're in between fledgling and nestling that it's really hard to tell. And so I have to send those pictures to Skywatch and be like, does this thing need to come in or not? Carefully grab with a towel and contain. If it's injured, transport to Skywatch. For babies, nestling, bare, no feathers, versus fledgling, feathers, standing out of nest. So just learn the difference between those if you see them. If the nest is within reach, replace a nestling back into the nest, but keep an eye out. And who to call. So in New Hanover County, there's me. In Pender County, there's Hampstead Wildlife Rehab. That's Sherry Avery. She's great. Great bunny person. I send all my bunnies to her. Brunswick County is Misty Rogers. She's on River Road. So Jackie's Creek, I think, is the area that she's in. So sort of in between Leland and Boiling Springs Lakes. And then obviously Skywatch, bird rescue. If it's a bird, it goes to Skywatch. But we have sort of a network of transporters. So if it's something that you're uncomfortable catching or transporting, we can usually find somebody to do that. All right. Sorry. Hold on. I double clicked.
That was a good last
Oh, come on. Sorry for all of you who were taking the picture of the screen when I went past it. Oh, boy. All right. Good Lord. There we go. So any questions that didn't get asked during the presentation, if you want to ask them now. Yes.